Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Megan and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, today we're talking about smartphones in schools. We've got Senator Henry Stern on the show today to talk about smartphones and what you need to know as we move into this school year.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. We welcome you to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing Communications. Megan Baer, our ACSA legislative advocate, back in the co-host seat today. Megan, how are you?
Doing all right, Naj. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. For those of you who may be wondering where Edgar is, he is not on assignment. He's actually claiming to be sick today. Whether he is or not, I haven't heard him talk in like 2 days, but apparently he's got some kind of cold or something like that. Megan, part of me thinks he might be sick. Part of me thinks this is just an extension of his 3-day weekend.
I mean, COVID's going around. I don't know. Well, we hope to see him in office again soon.
That is right. That is right. Yes. Folks, coming up, Senator Henry Stern from the 27th District. He is going to be on the show today to talk about smartphones in schools. You may remember 2 weeks ago, Governor Newsom putting out a message saying that school districts should start considering restrictions on cell phones. We're going to digest some of that and talk to the senator about what's happening in the Capitol in just a couple of moments. First, Megan, and I'm going to do 2 stories here, and then want to get your thoughts on what happens inside the Capitol. So the first one is on food dyes. The first synthetic food dyes, the Assembly has gone through this Assembly Bill 2316 that would ban these dyes from food sold or offered at California public schools due to concerns about their toxicity. The bill was authored in response to a Cal EPA report that linked synthetic food dyes consumption with hyperactivity and other neurobehavioral effects in children. And then this pardon me, this caught my attention only because I actually see this happen in my house. We have an article about homework, which was published by ACSA. And again, if I took a straw vote of every middle schooler and high schooler that I know, they would be all for this. Some schools are now reconsidering their homework policies. A 2020 survey by researchers at Stanford found that 67% of 50,000 high school students that were surveyed said homework was a major source of stress. And the numbers are even higher when homework was at least 3 hours. Now, our state legislature has passed a bill encouraging school districts to evaluate the mental and physical health impacts of homework assignments. That is according to ACSA. The proposed legislation, according to EdSource, is waiting for the governor's signature. So, Megan, let me just ask you, because legislative session is over. All of these bills are moving to the governor for signature. There's a lot. So what is this process like from your experience inside the Capitol? Once the lawmakers have started moving these things to the governor's desk, like, what's the process?
Well, the governor has 12 days to sign or veto all these bills. So there's this huge volume of work for the governor's office. And, lobbying efforts really turn to the governor's office. And that includes legislators. And maybe Senator Stern can speak to this later. It includes legislators lobbying the governor and trying to convince him to sign their bills. So it'll be a flurry of new laws and some vetoes as well, I'm sure, will be coming out over the next couple of weeks.
That brings, I'm thinking about this. Lawmakers have spent so much time advocating for their specific bills and their issues. Now that it gets to the governor's desk, is there still an advocacy process? Do lawmakers still have to go to the governor or the governor's staff and say, here's why this is important?
Absolutely. I, began my career in the legislature, and, you work very hard to secure the other assemblymen and senators' votes. And then it really comes down to one person's signature. So there's all kinds of efforts that go into making sure that the governor and his staff understand the issue and how important it is. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like another ball game, but it's a whole nother lobbying effort that takes place to try to secure that signature.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens over there. I want to take a moment to say hello to some of our viewers. Jason Engel is here. Neri is here. Ellen Wheeler is here. Scott Smith with us as well. Deanna Coolian is with us. So thank you all so much for being with us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Let's go ahead and let's bring in our guests so we can really dive into this smartphone issue. Senator Henry Stern represents the 27th District, which is cities like Calabasas and Thousand Oaks in Southern California. He joins us for the first time on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Senator, it's great to have you here on the show. I listened to a podcast this morning and talking specifically about this issue, smartphones in schools, smartphones on school campuses and in classrooms. You're passionate about this issue. It's clear from hearing you speak on this topic, hearing others speaking on this topic, you specifically being a father of young kids, that's contributed to some of your passion behind this issue. What factors have led you to have that passion for this issue?
Yeah, I mean, certainly being a dad, and thank you to all the superintendents looking out for our students and our kids tuning in live. It's good to be in the hot seat. The lunch break, or is this the hot seat? I feel like I'm in the principal's office. I'm nervous. I got to tell you.
It's like a hot lunch, you know?
Hot, okay.
Yeah.
I like hot lunch.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I'm comfortable now. Yeah, I mean, I got a 2 and a 1-year-old, so I'm not in the thick of it yet, but I was a public school kid, and I was there before we, had smartphones, and I can date myself. I'm the oldest millennial in the legislature, so I have sort of a view into two worlds, and one where the coolest thing you could possibly have at school when I was growing up was a pager, and that was the sort of invasive nature of classroom distraction. But went to college before there was Facebook, and then Facebook happened a dorm room away from me when I was at Harvard, and I didn't think much of it. I thought, oh, this will be, a way to kill some time and I guess click on people. But little did I know the whole nature of social interaction was transforming before our very eyes, and addiction to not just the social media, but the phone itself was going to be a real risk to not just administrators, but to teachers being able to teach, and for young people and their sense of wellness. I mean, the Surgeon General's warning was not really a wake-up call because we all knew it was an emergency. It just verified what we already knew was heavy. So yeah, it's personal, but it's also it's my area of expertise in policy too. I've been working on tech policy now for a while, last 8 years or so in the state capitol. So I feel like I have a sense of how the tech industry operates as well.
Yeah, and it seems to be coming to a head right now. So Governor Newsom just issued this letter to school leaders, enacting superintendents and school leaders to enact cell phone restrictions. And then, of course, you have your legislation. There's a couple other pieces of bills out there focused on social media and smartphone restrictions. So I guess, why do you think the moment is now? And why is this getting so much attention from state leaders now?
I would argue that the moment was a few years ago, frankly, before this got so ubiquitous. And I think if we had had some of these restrictions in place, or at least a clear authority for school districts to be able to move forward, if we had it in place before the pandemic and before we went very screen heavy with education, we'd be in a lot better place coming back to semi-regular life. But I think this was the nudge that we decided was needed from Sacramento. I'm a big local control advocate. And I know the governor is too. We don't like to necessarily be heavy-handed in edicts from on high, but we needed to clearly, authorize districts who might have questions about their liabilities, or maybe are in a political jam where it's a little anxiety producing to tackle the smartphone issue or get into social media issues at your school board meetings. We felt like we needed that nudge from Sacramento to say, yeah, we have to go now. And a lot of districts are beating us to the punch. I mean, this is not an issue of no one's doing anything. People are experimenting and trying different policies out. In our backyard, I've got, smaller districts like Conejo Unified and Simi Las Virgenes, and then the titans like LAUSD who've decided to go very pointedly at this smartphone issue by January of this coming year. So our legislation, I co-authored one of the assembly bills you were referring to that makes clear that everyone's got to at least have a policy of some sort by not this summer, but the coming summer. So you get 2 school years, and by that time, you've got to have adopted a policy. It doesn't say you've got to have a phone pouch or a phone locker policy or a ban or a bell to bell, or in theory, under the law, you could have no restrictions. And you could say, we're going to just go open campus here and everyone can do what they want. So the legislation doesn't say what you have to do. It just says that you have to have something. And the same thing goes for social media. We enacted a similar bill that sort of works alongside the smartphone one to say, yes, schools can have policies to restrict or limit or all out ban social media. But again, if a school board decided to go a different direction, they're at liberty to do so.
And folks, if you have any questions for Senator Stern, go ahead and put those into the chat, and we'll try and tackle some of those a little bit later. Senator, we've heard from many of our members about the harmful social media posts that get reported to the social media companies, but don't actually get removed or taken down. You have a bill, SB 1504, that ACSA supports that looks to address this. Why did you introduce this particular piece of legislation? And at the end, what do you hope that it accomplishes?
I mean, it's been awful out there watching things like fight pages and other kinds of social media phenomena, one called the Knockout Club from a few years back, basically using these platforms as weapons to bully other students. And I've personally known students who have been paralyzed from being punched in the face, not just as that punch alone, but as a post, as fodder for either a Snapchat or something on YouTube. We recently had another loss of life within LAUSD after a fight page had that student beat up multiple times, and the school actually complaining to the social media companies about these incidents, and the reports fall on deaf ears. The students will report it, the schools will, the teachers will, and they don't say anything. So we figured it was time to try to push the envelope and get some accountability in place. So now the administrators or teachers or students or parents, but that sort of universe of folks will have legal recourse, can actually sue the social media company or the platform if they don't respond to a cyberbullying report within 10 days. And so there has to be some kind of means of correspondence, and it's going to be different for different platforms. But now if a student or a parent tells you something horrible about them is up online and they can't figure out how to get it down, not only can they send that report, but you can fight on their behalf. And we're hoping that the superintendents out there go hard on this one, because there's only so much you can expect the school themselves to control, right? Some of it is just, once it's up there, it's not something happened on campus anymore. Even if the incident itself is gone, it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And so it's fights, it's moments of privacy, like literally bathrooms aren't even off limits now. You're seeing in-class bullying even going on against teachers, against fellow students. So now we'll have a little power back in superintendent's hands.
Well, and I'll just say, Senator, this is a story that I have heard from so many different superintendents and school leaders and principals, and sometimes even like false threats to campuses that just wreak chaos.
Yes.
So, and then the social media platforms being completely unresponsive as a school site leader is trying to, create a productive, calm learning space. So, we just really appreciate your leadership on it and hearing us. And we hope that these companies start to be a little more responsive, because our number one job is to learn, and all these things you're describing, they really get in the way.
100%. And if you all have stories, I mean, one of the big things I need, frankly, is from your members, specific incidents in your regions. There may be opportunities also for aggregated action against the platforms too, where you could have multiple districts at once banding together, where ACSA be sort of the perfect conduit. But the more real life stuff I can hear from you all, the more I'll have in my arsenal here to go up against a very well-heeled lobby in the tech industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So changing gears a little bit, super appreciate that though. So talking about facilities, another big kind of topic and something you've worked on a lot. So Prop 2, facilities bonds going to voters here in a couple months in November. We're going to have some resources available for climate resiliency and for heat mitigation. And clearly that's an area of passion of yours for a very long time, since I've known you for a very long time, before you were even a senator. And you chair the Joint Committee on Climate Change Policy. So what's your vision here? What kind of projects are you hoping to see supported?
I mean, the main thing I see in the chat so far is exactly the issue. It's hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hot. It's hot in places that you didn't think it was going to be so hot. Schools out there don't even have air conditioning in certain climates. Others have, the same old beaters from the 80s and 90s. The wiring may be old and defunct, or the panels may need upgrading. There may be opportunities to even get you a better rate on your power bills by installing solar and batteries. These are the nuts and bolts things that I'm hoping Prop 2 can unlock. I know there are other sort of important capital projects out there that people have their minds on, but I'm really excited that we have those sort of in-building upgrade opportunities to make sure that it's a safe learning environment and a safe teaching environment, safe working environment, because it really is. I mean, when you get these days, we're in a extreme heat warning. I got my kid in preschool right now, and it's 110 degrees out. Power went out. They have a diesel generator they've got to run the AC off of, and the kids are walking by a diesel generator. This stuff gets very tough. And so we're hoping across political lines that people just want their schools cool. And the other interesting element is opportunities outside the classroom too. We did give eligibility to more shade, playground upgrade opportunities, even mini forests or tree canopy, but also those sort of shade sales and things like that. So we push legislation that allow folks to go faster with shade structures if they want to do playground upgrades as well. And so we know if it's 110 degrees, the blacktop itself is up in the mid 130s. And if not managed properly, can be deadly to workers and to young people. So anyway, Prop 2, I think, will be a lifesaver, and more importantly, also just upgrade our core, the core of every community, which is our neighborhood school.
Senator, I just for clarification, and I'm going to put you on the spot for your elevator
Please,
speech, because I know you've probably done 50 elevator speeches on the smartphone use. You mentioned that you have two young kids. I have a 17-year-old, a senior in high school. I have a student that is 20 now, but worked through the same high school. And you had mentioned districts enacting policies over the next couple of years. And I guess the question that I would ask you is, there's some comfortability for me that if I needed to, I could reach my 17-year-old and vice versa. So
yes.
How do you...
Yeah, let's get into that one. That's a good one.
What is your elevator speech for someone like me?
Well, look, I grew up in a district where we had a mass shooting and a deadly wildfire. Lost my home in the Woolsey fire, went through the borderline shooting and Saugus, all in this district, right? So the anxiety that parents feel when they send their kids off to school, especially with those kinds of incidents right on the front of their radar, not to mention just your everyday, totally unacceptable levels of violence we've been seeing in some of these LAUSD schools, where we've had some deadly stabbings and gang-related stuff. And so, I would say you should have the ability to stay in touch with your student. And we don't intend for this smartphone restriction to be in any way an inhibition, and in fact, maybe an opportunity for innovation. Now, the innovations themselves may end up being more basic and rudimentary. It could be anything from giving your kid a dumb phone when they go to school. And we've been looking at even funds that we could put together the state for a district that did want to step up and put lockers in place, a way to help maybe districts with fewer resources be able to make sure every student has at least access to, a basic device that can make a phone call. And sometimes those devices actually are better in a wildfire emergency in terms of being able to access different bands of the network. But yeah, dumb phones, but also having better central modes of communication within the school. I just don't think that this should be a sort of straight cutoff from students to their families or their loved ones or their caretakers back home. So we're seeing interesting experimentation about how that can work. There's also ways to do it where you don't have to lock your phone up at all. And the restriction may be about keeping the phone either in your backpack or even just having the school's Wi-Fi geofence so that your phone just simply can't use certain apps. It couldn't access your Facebook page or your Snapchat. So you may even be able to keep the device on yourself, still be able to text, and even your parents know where you are, but certain functions could be disabled. So a lot of different flavors of this restriction, and that's really where we're hoping for the innovation out there amongst districts is find what works. And there's going to be different sensitivities and different geographies, different politics, things like that. So that's why we left it open-ended.
I want to point out one of our loyal viewers, Neri, had here in the chat with respect to your comments here. Refreshing to hear your advocacy and understanding what schools and districts are facing during these difficult times. So our viewers are certainly enjoying what you're bringing here to the table. I do have, as we close here, I do have a very important question, because you said you're the oldest millennial in the legislature. That is correct?
Yep.
I was correct. Okay. So you being the oldest millennial in the legislature, I have to ask you, what is it like then to be working with those that are not millennials and those that are millennials? What is that balance?
I've got both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
I remember VHS. I remember when they would wheel into class in biology and you would pop in the video and you'd watch here's the nucleus and whatever, you would get, it was a different era. It was that schoolhouse rock era of education. And now it's faster than I can catch up with. And I feel, now 8 years in, I'm a dad and I'm old and I'm, grumpy about things and worried about public safety and worried about traffic and speeding and mosquitoes and school funding and all the things that a lot of normal parents out there are into. So my job is to walk between those two worlds and kind of, still hold on to that, the belief in transformation and all that idealism while kind of getting the reality check of paying the bills and getting through everyday life.
It's an adventure for sure. Senator Henry Stern, representing the 27th district here in the state of California. Senator, it's been great having you on the show. We look forward to having you next time.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys. And say hey to Edgar and the rest of the crew.
We certainly will. When Edgar decides to come back to work, we'll absolutely tell him.
Yeah, dude, I'll tell Yvonne. I'll make sure he knows.
There we go. Right. Perfect. Thank you, Senator, very much. Folks, if you we got all kinds of stuff to tell you about. By the way, one of our producers in the back, Gianna, just said that she got her first cell phone in the 8th grade. Megan, when did you get your first cell phone?
I think like 10th grade.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was a dumb phone. So I love the concept of a dumb phone.
Yeah.
I might have to do that with my children when they get a lot older. They're not even close to being ready for that. But
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good thinking on that. Folks, we've got lots to tell you about as far as what we offer here at ACSA for you. Let's start with our podcast, because our podcast, part of our ACSA podcast network. We'll start with the Leadership Classroom. This is our podcast where we talk to leaders outside of public education about their leadership skills, what they've learned along the way to becoming a leader, those educators that impacted them, and how they identify leaders. That is on the Leadership Classroom podcast. Our last one, which came out a couple of weeks back, with Dr. Luke Wood, the president from California State University, Sacramento. It is an incredible discussion that we had with Dr. Wood. You can access that on Apple and on Spotify. We've got the QR codes. If you didn't scan it, we'll pop those back up in just a moment. You can scan those, listen to those podcasts. A lot of great discussion. There you go. See, I told you, QR codes. Go ahead and scan those. And then we've also got Behind the Bills. That is our governmental relations podcast hosted by Ivan Carrillo. We hear about the up-to-date news headlines from inside the Capitol, and also have a deep discussion with a special guest. Megan has been one of those special guests. You've got QR codes there. Go ahead and scan those. Listen to that podcast as well. And then, of course, the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, also available as a podcast. Go ahead and hit your QR codes for that as well. Megan, I've done plenty of promotion on podcasts. How about if I let all of you know, if you like what you see here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. When you do, you'll get instant alerts when we're about to come on with breaking news, and of course, reminders about our regular Wednesday show. And folks, if you have great stories happening in your school districts, we want to tell those stories too. Go ahead and send your photos, your talking points, your news releases to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl at mcarl@axa.org. Whew, that was a lot. That was a lot of promos right there. Megan, I'm just going to ask you this question, because I know that I asked the senator about, what his elevator speech is, and you've got younger kids, as you mentioned, so we're on two extremes here. But you had talked about, you're hearing more and more from the superintendents, from our leaders out there, about the impact of smartphones on campus. Do you think that this idea of having the districts enact policies, but giving them, kind of the leeway to come up with the policy that they think works most effectively, really kind of falls in line with that local control, which he talked about being a very big supporter of local control?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about the legislation is it balances both sides, where we know every community is so different, has different needs. Your parents want different things. You're facing different challenges. So there's a lot of flexibility in the law. I also do understand the perspective of at least wanting to prompt the conversation. Every week there's new reports about the damaging effects of social media and these phone addictions and these apps and all this, trying to create a safe space for learning. So, of course, our districts have gone ahead and already done it. We didn't need to be authorized to do it as districts. So I appreciate that there's the local control element. It's an interesting balance of the two kind of pushes and pulls.
It would be wrong if I didn't have our team behind the scenes bring up the photo that we've only been talking about for weeks now. That one right there, the Edgar and Naj winning the cornhole tournament. Again, the reason that we continue to show this is because Megan said, I'm sure we're going to see this 7 times on the show. This would be number 4, Megan. See what happens when you say, I'm sure we're never going to hear the end of that. Time number 4. See what happens when you voice it.
I need to be careful what I say clearly, because Michael Kelly's going to get you in trouble if you post it one more time.
I know. That's all right. He'll be fine. Folks, thanks so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next week right here.